Donald Trump has reached China to participate in a bilateral meeting with Premier Xi Jinping. He has termed this meeting as a meeting of G2 bloc. Now, what is G2 bloc? Obviously, we are going to discuss that in video, but also we have to understand this meeting is not an ordinary meeting. It is a very, very important meeting, and that's why it is being watched by countries all across the world, including India. Now, when you talk about two countries, US and China, they have control over 50% of world's trade, and that's why a handshake between India and handshake between US and China could lead to end of trade war, could bring revolution in the technology, and can also get world rid of the energy crisis that it is facing. So let us try to understand first of all the concept that why meeting between US and China is being termed as G2 concept. So again, G2 is not a formal concept. It is not a formal, we can say, block. It is an informal partnership. And the term G2 came back somewhere in year 2005 itself. Overall, the entire concept rests on the principle that both US and China, as they are leading countries, both in terms of economic control as well as in terms of the, we can say, military power, thus they need to have a joint management of global issues. Both countries should not, we can say, fight with each other, but rather they should come together and then they should together decide about many vital decisions related to the global order. Economic and political coordination is the basic fact which is considered under the G2 concept. Leadership by two largest economy, that is how simply we can define it. If you look at the origin of G2 idea, it was proposed in 2005 and suggested by two noted experts, C. Fred Bergsten, and it was also supported by a well-known international relations expert and author, Bigno Brzezinski. Now, this particular concept that was proposed in 2005, when Obama became president of the United States of America, he picked up on this idea, and this concept became very, very popular during Obama administration. He wanted to guide the US foreign policy and its relation with China based on this principle to some extent. And he also believed that both US and China share a global leadership vision. So when you talk about the Obama era cooperation, how this entire concept has helped in deepening of relation between US and China. So strategic and economic dialogue began somewhere in 2009 when Obama became president. Before cooperation with Hu Jintao, that time a Chinese leader Hu Jintao is Hu Jintao was had a meeting with Obama, and that's when both of countries agreed that they should try to frame a goal which is common to them, where their strategic interests can converge for a kind of positive bilateral relationship. Economic coordination efforts were also launched in many spheres of bilateral trade, and there was overall attempt to reduce tension, because when you talk about US and China, there has always been a tension because of the rapid economic rise of China, where many times American experts and earlier presidents have considered China not as a friend but a kind of rival, a kind of competitor. So that's what US President Obama wanted to diffuse or reduce that time. Now, after some years, the entire vision of G2 itself underwent significant decline, and the reason was because that rivalry between US and China got intensified again. And this rivalry was not limited in one particular sphere, such as economic sphere. It was a broad kind of rivalry. So, strategic interest to talk about on Iran, and this rivalry was kind of broad nature, where countries were not able to see each other in eye on the issues such as Iran, on Russia-Ukraine war later on, or even the control of strategic minerals such as critical minerals or rare earth minerals such. Not only that, China also was emboldened because it then began to see US as a declining economic power as such. And US also shifted its overall stance to strategic rivalry. This is something that US also has documented in its drafted policy, US foreign policy. Trade and geopolitical tensions began to rise, and that is the reason why the idea of G2 itself became weaker and weaker. Now, what we see as the time passed is the China's position on G2. It is not similar to what US has made its stance clear as such. So China, on the other hand, has claimed that it is not in the favor of supporting a smaller, powerful bloc of countries. Rather, it favors multilateralism. This is the flavor which should run, or which should be able to run the world's economy, global economy. China also said that it believes in the shared future for mankind. That means all countries, like for example, from different areas of the world, should come together. Their interests should converge, and the decision should be based on the what you can call as multilateral stance, not we can call as the block-led stance. So it overall has rejected the dominance of two countries, that is US, China, or any two countries as such, supports wider global participation, and that's why we can see China has been able to build a lot of regional alliances, multilateral alliances, whether it is Shanghai Cooperation Organization, whether it is the BRICS, which has continuously expanded and brought in new members with passage of time. So overall, China's stance was clear and quite different from American stance, especially Donald Trump's stance as of now, that it wants a fair world order, not dominated by just few countries. Now the question is that Trump again has revived this idea when he became president and took charge of American presidency in his second term. That's when he repeatedly began to use the word or term G2 to refer to US-China relationship. Not only that, he even praised Xi Jinping. He has stated that he enjoys a very good relationship with President Xi Jinping, and he has called this particular meeting a G2 summit. That's how also he has written that very soon G2 meeting is about to convene. So this term again has been to some extent revived by Trump. Why? Experts argue that this particular term is a clear reflection of how Trump want to view this entire world. He believed that now both China and US should come on equal footing because both of them are equal partner, and that's why this has given a renewed attention to concept as such. Now if you look at the expert opinions on how feasible it is that US and China can build a block, something that is we can say strongly allied with their core concept of diplomacy and all that. So they remain very skeptical in nature. Meeting is seen just as a strategic testing. Strategic testing here means both US and China want to see to what extent each country is able to give or willing to give concessions when we talk about the trade related deals or tariff related deals, or even at the global front we're talking about various wars being waged all across the world as such. Both sides are probing each other's red line, to what extent a country would not react. And overall, still when we talk about the post Obama era, when the rivalry between US and China, or even in the second phase of Obama's presidency when rivalry between US and China was heated, that competition is still dominant because China is trying to assert its powerful military in the Indian Ocean region, Pacific Ocean region, and also it is trying to make roadways into the continents such as Africa and South America by using its economic prowess. So to some extent, it is trying to replace Western countries, including America, in their traditional, what you can call as the backyard. So the aim overall is to control tension. That's why strategic experts argue that aim is not to create a solid block of two countries, but to control tension by creating what you can call as possibility for concessions, possibility for a better dialogue between the nation. So the question is, what are the major challenges? Will G2 come to fruition, or it will face severe challenges, and again it will lapse as it did in the 2009? So US has sought continued dominance in the global sphere. This has been clear from Trump's statement also, whether it is related to Russia-Ukraine war, whether it is related to the Iran war, or whether it is related to the overall energy related policy, or even the Venezuela, the foreign policy that Trump administration has shown with reference to Venezuela and even to some extent Cuba. China also, because its economic might has grown significantly compared to last couple of decades, it is trying to seek greater influence. It is also in a mood of expanding its territory. Many times it has clearly shown and reflected its stance when we talk about Taiwan, for example. A strategic rivalry thus is expected to continue even if both countries agree to some extent on coming together on some sort of trade deals or some sort of ceasefire agreement when we talk about Iran or Ukraine crisis. Trade and security disputes are expected to remain. Conflicting ambitions are expected to remain. And that is something which can put a spanner in the entire idea of G2 bloc. Now, what are the global implications and conclusion? So first of all, if you talk about Europe, Europe is also looking forward to this meeting to understand how US and China basically try to build a relationship, or if there is going to be any significant changes in their bilateral partnership. Because you know that Europe has been kind of sidelined after Trump took charge of American presidency. They had a lot of dispute, whether it is related to the membership of NATO, whether it is related to we can call as the control over Greenland, as US has showed its desire, or even on Ukraine. When we talk about America is not so much willing to pay price for it or send weapons to it. So that's why Europe also is very much concerned that if China and US come together, it can create other problems and challenges even in the economic and military sphere. BRICS is also causes of the superpower dominance, because the entire idea of BRICS is nothing but reflection of multilateralism. So any two countries coming together to create a singular block of G2 would create a direct threat to the entire concept of BRICS. Trade cooperation, however, is still possible, and that would be good for many of countries. And full G2, however, seems to be unlikely. There is not going to be any economic military kind of block here as we can expect. Competition and cooperation can exist together. Now the question is why India is so much interested and is looking forward to the meeting between Trump and Xi. So in essence, you can say India has much to lose and much to gain based on how this entire meeting goes. India closely thus is watching the summit, and the reason is simple. If you talk about from India's economic perspective, both US and China are its two major trade partners if you look at the bilateral trade value. Similarly, Trump weakened after Iran war. So US seems to be on the back foot. In Iran war, it has lost a lot of assets. Also, it has spent a lot of money as such. So it is economically bleeding, financially bleeding. Gas prices has kept on rising up. That has led to decline of the major support for Trump in the United States of America itself. So that's why it is possible that US might be willing to give some concessions to China when we come to the assertiveness of China or the desire of China, even to some extent of the territory expansion. And that may hurt India, because if US leaves Taiwan, in that case, China can have strong control over Taiwan and can try to imitate similar thing along the Indian border, whether it is in the Ladakh region where Chinese and Indian troops have kept on this coming together, coming against each other. For example, Doklam crisis we have discussed before, or Galwan crisis we have discussed before, we have seen before. So such kind of territorial expansion by China can directly threaten the unity, integrity, and we can call as the sovereignty of India. So, to some extent, strategic balance may also we see shifting. How a strategic interest might shift or balance might shift. So, we know till now, because of the heated rivalry that US and China have witnessed, India to some extent has benefited from this rivalry, because this particular rivalry between US and China has led to India becoming a swing power, where US has looked to India in economic sense, in military sense, to balance China's rise, Chinese assertiveness. And that's the reason why tech partnership to some extent has deepened to a great extent between US and China, US and India, even in critical sectors such as artificial intelligence, such as the electrical vehicles, solar energy generations, and variety of military technical cooperation we have seen coming to fruition as well. Not only that, in the space sciences, both countries have joined together, launched several missions together. So that there is a fear that India would see a reduction in its importance if US and China are able to water down the differences and the rivalry between them. And trade systems that both countries, US and China, may develop in future could lead to bypassing India. So economically also it would be difficult for India, challenging for India. However, on the positive side, India can also benefit from the deals on energy security, because US is looking forward to China to play its role, to play its what you can call as the importance that it has for Iran, and then bring Iran to a negotiation table that might lead to the opening of Strait of Hormuz. And you know that majority of India's oil and gas passes through Strait of Hormuz, and that can actually lead to we can say benefit for India, as India will not have to face the disruption due to this particular route. So oil and gas route which are at risk, that might we see opening up. US wants China to pressure Iran. Taiwan issue, however, affect India. Try to think from energy perspective, the outcome of meeting might be good for India, but again from the territorial expansion perspective, the masses that US give or US will give on Taiwan is going to greatly affect India, because if US withdraw any kind of strong support to Taiwan, stop sending its military weapons and equipment to Taiwan, in that case, China can see increasing its control over this area. And that is the reason why India is monitoring this summit closely. So no matter whatever is the outcome, India is going to have a positive as well as negative implications. That's all for this particular video. If you like the video, please like and share with your friends as subscribe channel for more content. Thank you very much.